Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim, and you have read 3 chapters for today. Is that the most we've ever done together? We're going verse by verse through the book of Ezekiel. We are now in a new section of the book, literally. The first 24 chapters or so are all about the fall of Jerusalem and the ministry of Ezekiel. But here we've got 8 chapters, chapters 25 to 32, I think. And they all have to do with Ezekiel's oracles, his prophecies against other nations, foreign nations. I'm kind of lumping them together. And again, it's not really to help us make more rapid progress, although it will help us make more rapid progress. If you're worried about how long we're going to be in Ezekiel, we're about to really cover some ground this week. But I think if you've read for today, 25, 26, and 27, you're understanding now why my plan has been to put these chapters together. So we're really going to sort of, these next 8 chapters, kind of move through them. Again, this is, I think, a 10-chapter week for us starting yesterday. So anyway, God bless you. Thanks for being with me. Let's jump right in. Chapter 25 first sort of deals with 4 bad neighbors for Israel, Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Philistia. And we just sort of walk through those together. These are sort of short oracles. And again, an oracle is a prophecy, in this case, prophecies of doom. And it's really pretty interesting. In all of these 8 chapters, I think there's a total of 16 nations that God is going to curse, or Ezekiel is given a word to predict the downfall of these particular nations. Interestingly enough, in all of these chapters we're about to read together, the nation of Babylon is never mentioned. Babylon is not one of the nations. And so, again, I'm trying to make sure I'm right about that. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Babylon's not mentioned. And I believe that's because Babylon is going to literally be the nation that's going to conquer them all. This rise of this Neo-Babylonian empire here at this particular time in history is rather devastating for that Fertile Crescent, this region. And so Babylon is not one of the cursed nations. Again, Babylon is going to be the victor nation in all of this, in this period of history. It doesn't mean that their day isn't coming as well, but right now it is Babylon that is on the rise, historically, politically, and in this sense, in a military way. Ammon is the first cursed nation. I believe if you look at a map, Ezekiel just sort of goes in a counterclockwise, it's just kind of going around the map in his own mind. And so we start with Ammon. Ammon is cursed in this case because they sort of took delight in Israel's downfall. Israel's being punished for their sins, and Ammon got a kick out of that. And they're cursed for that. That's interesting because, I don't know, I think there's a whole lot of us. Is there a German word, Schadenfreude, for when you get some sort of pleasure out of somebody else's demise? And Schadenfreude is the particular sin of Ammon. They enjoyed the fact that Israel is punished for her sins, and God comes right back and punishes them. They're going to be next. It's just that sense that, when you see others punished for their sins, that should give you incentive to quit your own sins and not so much just, smack your lips and enjoy the fact that others get what's coming to them. There's probably a whole sermon there for all of us, because I think there's a little bit of that in all of us, that sort of, entertainment we get out of seeing other people finally get what's coming to them without really acknowledging what's possibly coming to us. That's the sin of Ammon. Moab, Edom. Remember, the Edomites are singled out because they are the descendants of Esau. They're sort of the brother nation of Israel. So for that reason, there's always this sense of you stood by and did nothing while your brother suffered. And Obadiah is the prophet, specific prophet that prophesies to Edom, but here Ezekiel gives him a word as well. Philistia, of course, is the main enemy all the way through the book of Judges, which we're doing on Sunday mornings here at Woodburn. Also, David ultimately, seems to, bring down the Philistines. But interestingly, just, because I'm not sure that we always remember this. Sometimes the Israel, that region is called Palestine. Even now, the Palestinians. It comes from that word, Philistine, Philistia. It's a related word, and even to this day, sometimes we'll call that region Palestine, coming from the ancient Philistines. I just think that's kind of ironic and interesting. So chapter 25 runs through those four enemy nations pretty quickly. Chapter 26, then we're going to get nearly 3 chapters simply on the nation of Tyre, Tyre. It's a city state that was on the coast of Phoenicia, and something of a glorious city state it was. This message is different. They're singled out in a different kind of way. And you'll notice that what they've done that's different is in chapter 26, verse 2, when Jerusalem falls. It is the city-state of Tyre that thinks that creates the opening, the opportunity for them to sort of become the center of the universe, the gateway to the nations. And in many ways, Tyre is sort of situated for that, because it really was something of a glorious coastline city. But in this case, their desire to benefit at Jerusalem's demise brings them under the curse. And so this chapter 26, sort of leaves them as a bare rock plunged into the sea. And then chapter 27 picks up as sort of a funeral song. And again, this hasn't happened yet, that the city hasn't been judged yet, but this is the prediction, the prophecy, and it will happen. And in chapter 27, it's a description of the city-state as this gorgeous ship. And again, it's in the form of a funeral song, all the way up to chapter 28, where we'll pick up tomorrow. So you're thinking, and in some ways I'm thinking, what's the relevance of this? Again, you're thinking, I'm glad you let us read this quickly, because there's just not a lot here. And honestly, there's not. I don't find a real sermon here, so to speak. And I don't know any pastor ever in the history of preaching that's preached from these passages, unless they were like me, just kind of going verse by verse, and therefore not really wanting to just skip them over. But why are they here? What's the purpose in the preaching of Ezekiel? And I do think we need to answer that. Obviously, the audience for Ezekiel is not these nations. They're never probably going to get these messages, at least not in time to help them. Ezekiel's still preaching, to Israel, to the people of God, to the exiles. And so why do they need to hear this? I mean, that becomes a question. Why do they need to hear 3 chapters against the city-state of Tyre, And I think the answer is to demonstrate to God's own people that even though they have broken covenant, and even though in this particular moment God is punishing them, God is still faithful to his people, and God will defend his people, and God will honor the covenant where he said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And so it's in these chapters where the people of God are able to see God's utter consistency. He hasn't singled them out in any way for his wrath. God executes his wrath against all the nations that turn against him, against all the nations that do not follow him. In the preaching of Joel, I think we find out that Tyre is one of the premium slave nations in the world. They buy and sell in Ezekiel's day. They're buying and selling masses of slaves. And so again, God's not going to somehow rain down fire and brimstone on his own people and ignore the sins of the other nations of the world. You see that? And so the beauty of these chapters for God's own people is that they get to see that even though at this particular moment he's disciplining his child, his chosen people, Israel, at the very same time he's defending Israel, and he's going to continue to defend them and bless those who bless them and curse those who curse them. I'm going to pick up tomorrow in chapter 28. We're going to slow down just for one day. Chapter 28 for tomorrow, verses 1 to 26, because this is a really interesting chapter that is often read on both levels. We're talking about the king, the prince of Tyre, but also there's a remarkable way in which we often see the prince of Tyre as also Satan himself. And there's a way to read chapter 28 on 2 different levels, and we're going to do that tomorrow together, okay? So just tomorrow, one chapter, and then we're going to pick it back up by the end of the week. But tomorrow, chapter 28. Did I say I love you? Did I actually say, welcome and thank you and all of that? I jumped right in today, but welcome, and I love you and thank you and all of that. I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing, 10 o'clock.